God's brought us into this to support that message. Now, to support it the way He wants us to. It's important that we see what God sees. That's why we've got to dig into the prophecies of God and know what God has said about these 10 nations, these 10 kings in Europe that are uniting even now. They have been. I mean, the Berlin Wall coming down 21 years ago, that opened the way for these things to happen. Look at the dramatic changes in Europe since that time. Look at Europe today. Of course, there's problems, and as I've covered in that forum on the image of Daniel 2, it's a mixture of iron and clay. It doesn't have the strength to durably last for decades and decades and decades, but it certainly will have the strength to rise as a superpower for a few short years. It will have that iron strength to fulfill numerous dramatic prophecies. Revelation 10, verse 7 says, "But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he has declared to his servants, the prophets." God, you see, has revealed that there is a mystery that needs to be revealed to this earth. Truth revealed to the people of this earth. Verse 11 says, "You must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings." So right when this mystery is about to be finished, right when God brings a watchman along to warn the people of God that they're turning away from his prophecies, that they're turning away from what Mr. Armstrong taught, right when this happens, God says He raises up a work to warn the nations. Verse 1 of chapter 11, it talks about, "And there was given me a reed like a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God." Warn the church as well. Warn those that worship therein. There's no chapter break really in this passage. It's just one continuous message. And that's what God is giving us. That's the vision that He's given to this church. To warn God's people, to warn this world, to proclaim what is coming. We have a booklet titled The Little Book that discusses this prophecy in Revelation 10 and 11. My father writes on page 12, "Even the commission to prophesy again," he's speaking of verse 11, which we just read, "it makes no sense unless you know that the end-time Elijah prophesied the first time. If he hasn't come, that means Elijah still must come on the scene and prophesy the first time." Of course, he's talking about the office or the prophecy that Mr. Armstrong fulfilled himself, that he came on the scene and fulfilled this the first time. And now here comes another work, a work of raising up the ruins of that work that was destroyed after he died. Back to the booklet, it says, "The basic theme of our whole work is prophecy." That is what God prophesied it would be in Revelation 10 and verse 11. That's been the theme of this work that's been around now. Really, right about that same time that the wall came down. This church started on December 7th, 1989, just a month later, a month after that event, when that station manager called Pasadena. And we know from history what was already happening, sadly, in the Worldwide Church of God. But God had a solution. It was a very small beginning, a mustard seed beginning, just a handful of people, just a little manuscript. And right away, work began on a little newsletter that was called the Philadelphia Trumpet, that is now the Trumpet magazine. It's been around here for 20 years or so. More than that. It has a circulation of over 300,000. That's just the monthly print version of the magazine. Soon after that, there was a brief stop on radio before we went to television in 1993 with the Key of David. It's hard to believe, isn't it? The Key of David's been around for 18 years now.
The Key of David.
18 years. It's on 194 television stations today. The World Tomorrow program, again, sadly, has long since been taken off the air because those following Mr. Armstrong didn't want that message. They didn't want to go on television with God's truth. They were embarrassed by it, to be frank. They were embarrassed by the prophecies of God. And so someone has to continue. Someone has to carry on. And someone has been, to the tune of about 600 episodes since 1993. Verse 2, but the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. Speaking of that time then, around the tribulation. Verse 3, and I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Here again, a 3.5-year time period. That is the great tribulation, spoken of in so many prophecies. This 3.5-year period, verse 4, these are the 2 olive trees, speaking of those witnesses, those 2 witnesses, and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. I mean, what an awesome display. Even as this world erupts into worldwide conflagration and violence, God will make his presence known, using this as a last resort to help mankind see that there is a solution coming. There is an answer to the problems that we just see multiplying in our world. Notice what it carries on into. You can read the rest of the chapter later. Verse 13, in the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe is past, verse 14 says, and behold, the third woe comes quickly. I mean, everything's just happening so fast. Prophecies are being fulfilled so fast. It's happening so quickly, God says. And look at where it leads. Verse 15, and the 7th angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. This is where it's leading. This is what it's building to. The kingdoms of this world becoming God's kingdom, God's world. In fact, God has raised up this church to start a new world, to start with education, teaching, to start with that vision of hope. Look at Ephesians 3. You look at this world and it needs hope. It needs vision. It needs to know that it's not just going to end in a revolution and then that's it. It's not just going to end with a martyrdom and it's over. What's the point? Ephesians 3 and verse 9 it says, and to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of the world has been hid in God, who created all things by Jesus Christ. It's a little bit of an awkward translation here, but that word dispensation there, it means to distribute something. And it's implying that there's a work that's going to be busy with this distribution of God's truth. Even as the world is falling apart, God's not just going to sit back just because it's Satan's world and say nothing or do nothing. He's going to help this world, to warn this world about where it's headed, and then also present this world with the glorious solution to the problems of mankind, the insoluble problems that have never been fixed and that are only worsening with each passing day. Verse 8 it says, unto me, who am less than the least of all saints, is this grace given, that I should preach among the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ. And then it continues with verse 9. Paul was just so excited to preach these unsearchable riches. and to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of this world, it says, has been hid in God, who created all things by Jesus Christ. See, we have to help make men see this. We have to explain the mystery, and we have to bring people along and help them see how important it is to distribute the mystery, to publish this truth. That's our commission, to prophesy. Again, verse 10 goes on and says that even the principalities and spirit beings in the angelic realm want to know these mysteries themselves. I mean, they're peering into God's work here on earth. They're excited about it as well. You can look at 1 Peter 1 and verse 12 on your own time. Let me just quote to you, though, an excerpt from our booklet, Prophesy Again, which is based upon that verse in Revelation 10 that we read just a moment ago. My father writes in Prophesy Again, the angels are absolutely dazzled by what God is doing with man. And yet most of God's people today are not even interested in this mystery because they're so blind, just like Revelation 3 prophesied. They've lost their interest in the truth of God. They've lost their interest in studying the Bible. They're no longer excited about praying to the God of this universe. They've given up on fasting, on fellowship, on meditation, all those tools that we need to be strong Christians who are willing to fight for God, who are willing to warn for God, who are willing to proclaim God's truth, who can't think of doing anything else but standing up and saying something. My father finished here saying, God is evaluating our level of interest in this mind-staggering plan. That's quite a statement, but it's certainly true. God is evaluating our interest level in His work. People get so caught up into distractions, entertainment, things of that nature, so obsessive over those things, and have little or no interest at all in the things of God. It's sad because God is the only one who has the answers. God is the only one who gives us purpose, hope for the future. Mr. Armstrong often said that if our heart is not in God's work, well, we'll just simply drift away from God. If our heart really isn't in the work of God, why is it, if our heart's not in it, we just drift away? Well, it's because God's commission is a vision of hope. God's work is a prophetic work. If we lose that hope, if we lose our vision of the future, then, well, the work just becomes too difficult to carry on with. It's too hard to finish. As that proverb says, I mentioned it earlier, where there's no vision, the people perish. But take heart, take hope. In the rest of the verse it says, but he that keeps the law, he that holds on to it, happy is he. With so many prophecies being fulfilled, with world conditions worsening by the day, surely there must be a work of God on this earth proclaiming God's warning message of love. In fact, God says you can find that little group of faithful servants right at the center of the storm, giving meaning and hope to a dying world. Prophesy Again will tell you about those people and their labor of love. For the free booklet offer, go to thetrumpetdaily.com and download the PDF